Jeff, I think we started talking because we were so drawn. We started talking last year more because we were so drawn to your take on energy security and the security premium, right? We were first drawn to the neutral order and that whole thesis. You've been writing over this about the security premium for a long time now, and Hormuz just stress tested this in real time, and you compared it, on TV and elsewhere, that it's you know, kind of a mirror to what happened in 2020, right? When COVID broke prices to negative $36 a barrel. So can you tell us where, just to lay things out, where does this mirror image take us? Where do you see things going from here?
Well, I think the one thing that was different is demand coming down on top of supply is far
Mm.
less painful than supply coming down on demand. Meaning pulling demand out of the fabric of the economy is going to be a lot more painful than shutting in a well or
Mhm.
whatever is shut in on the supply side. So I think that's point number one. And the cost of taking those barrels out of the system, you're already seeing it. Like today, people are starting to go, uh-oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Uh, and you see WTI, dated Brent, these markets are starting to move now. And I think that realization and no end in sight. And the analogy that we've been using is the Red Sea. The Red Sea, the Houthis were bombed for 2 years straight by the Americans. After it was all said and done, no G7 flagged vessels in the Red Sea, and you only got back up to 50 to 75% of pre-conflict levels. So if we use that as the analogy, you're only going to you're going to be out 5 to 10 million barrels per day. And the question is, how much have you destroyed in Iraq and in Kuwait and those other countries in shutting in the production? I like to point out in
Mhm.
coming out of the Iranian Revolution, you went in at 6 million barrels per day in 1979, and after all the shut-ins for only 5 months, you came out at four because you damage the underlying integrity of the wells when you shut them in. They're going to have to be re-drilled. That's why I love the drillers the most in the investment outlook, is because you're going to have to re-drill a lot of wells. So that I think is going to be a critical part of this idea, is trying to get a handle on the longer term damage. So now let's put this into the stress to the system. I think it'll be at max stress sometime at the end of this month.
Mhm.
Um, the last weeks of April. I'd say almost everybody who does the math on this says mid-April to end of April, you're out of inventory. Once you're
Huh.
out of inventory, then you got to ration demand.
I started
And
seeing satellite data yesterday. It was saying it was the storage tanks were starting to turn red, in terms of running low.
yeah, you can't go down much further. And so, people go, how high can this go?
Mhm.
Um, we're in the middle of a repricing of the physical world. And it's, the point I like to say is everybody goes, oh, it can't go higher than X. It's just not a true statement. I just remember in the 2000s, people go,
Mhm.
oh, oil's going to trade in a 20 to 18 to $22 band. Boom. Now it's in a
Forever.
30 to
Yeah.
52. Boom. Now it's in a 50 to 55. Boom. Now it's a 70 to 75. And it was even my wildest expectations when it was all said and done. I would have
Yeah.
never thought it could go up 7X. Um, so when we
Yeah.
think about the repricing of all of these, whether if it's copper, oil, gas, all the raw materials that go into all of these different entities. The upside here, I think, is I don't think anybody has an idea, because what we're going to do is we're going to pull trillions of dollars out of the new economy and put it into the old economy, and it hasn't had
Mhm.
money since 2013, 2014. And it's not prepared for it, and it'll create cost inflation, which will drive up the underlying cost structure of the industries. And that's why what happens, like here's the example I give. In
Mm.
2000, oil was at $20 a barrel, and the companies were earning around 20, 25% ROEs. By 2006, 7, you were at nearly $100 a barrel, and they were earning in the low teens. Why
Mhm.
so much less? Cost went up. Um,
Yeah.
and I can go through example after example. That's what we're experiencing is a macro repricing. I think it's going to impact everything. and
What do you
bringing
think
it.
that looks like? Do you think it looks like a price floor, or do you think it looks like persistent backwardation, or a change in how contracts get written, or like I don't know.
I
What does it end up looking like for you?
It's going to be a massive amount of capital and everything from your world of clean tech and then
Yeah.
into
Mhm.
all the major old economy companies from I think Exxon will be the largest company in the world again. It'll
Mm.
be right back where it was before the end of the last cycle. Because remember in 2013, energy could do no bad. Everybody wanted to
Yeah.
own it. And in fact, max valuations, it was September of 2014, right before the oil price just absolutely collapsed.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get anybody to touch tech if their life depended upon it. And then for the following 12 years, we just rotated capital out of the old economy and into the new economy. And Nvidia, Microsoft, the rest of them are at the top of the heap again. But they were at the bottom. Actually, Nvidia wasn't even part of the story then. But they were
Yeah.
up in 2013, 2014. And I think what you're going to do is see them all the Bag Seven go down the rankings and the big commodity and old economy providers start dominating those things. I think the hyperscalers they have
Yeah.
positioning that can keep them there, but the rest of them are going to struggle.
Well,
Yeah.
let's go back to that on the sort of return to the old world, return to, the old economy. I think obviously the energy economy has changed a lot since 2013, for the better, for the worse, depending on how you look at it. And now we do have solar, wind, batteries come down the cost curve. You have new things like nuclear and geothermal also starting to enter the conversation. You said something at CERAWeek that I found was really interesting, right? What makes hydrocarbons so great is that they're portable and storable, but also what makes them so dangerous is that you're dependent on a strait. And so I think, we're going back to the old economy. Obviously, energy and energy security is more important than ever. But how does that play out when there are more options available? And in your mind, what are the realistic options here on the table
Mhm.
that kind of fit this new dual order?
Well, I like to always France has the lowest carbon footprint of any industrialized country in the world. It didn't get there because it wanted to save the planet. It got there because Charles de Gaulle forecasted exactly what is happening today. And that's why he got to 90% nukes. And I struggle with the fact that is it the is the idea of secure energy being clean? And I think it goes back to that point you were just making about the portability and storability.
Yeah.
The more portable, the more storable it is, the less secure it is, and the dirtier it is because it has to be organic. Because really,
Yeah.
what is oil? It's solar. All oil is solar energy stored in a natural battery that took what a million years to create.
Yeah.
The battery. Um, but all of that, the hydrocarbons are just simply batteries for solar energy. So, by thinking about that secure dynamic of energy, by definition, it has to be the cleaner versions, the cleaner tech, which is why I say, I'm a big subscriber. I mean, clean tech has had a great run since 2024, excuse me, and I think
Yeah.
it's gonna just go to the moon. I'm a big owner of it. I put it this way, my own portfolio, I own everything old economy. And by the way, I put green tech in there as part
Yeah.
of economy. It's heavy. I don't like the old economy. I just call it asset heavy. It requires
Okay, got it. Old economy isn't necessarily just like traditional energy, fossil fuels. It's really saying returning to the physical asset worlds.
it's asset heavy. That's why I like
Asset
Halo.
heavy.
Asset
Yeah.
heavy obsolescence.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think clean tech has also gone through its fair share of ups and downs. To your point, a lot of the initial momentum and driver behind it has been putting environment first as opposed to security and affordability. Where within that broader landscape do you see there being an opportunity for specific technologies to really compete and win now, right? If security is the core driver as opposed to environment or and affordability kind of coming afterwards, where within that new energy landscape do you see there being more that security premium really helping to bring those into the competitive landscape?
If I were to put all my money into one thing and try to develop it and own it, would be batteries. Um,
Hmm.
I think one thing you learn out of all of this war is you can't have a tanker refueler. Um, in fact, I learned this the other day from an ex-general. Yeah, you there's only like 6 of them in the world. They're easy to target, easy to find. You need portable battery packs. That's mobile energy. You got to go back to a new form of portable storable that
Mm.
makes
Haha.
them look not look very attractive. And so once you have that, batteries like the size of this desk that you can put in the back of a helicopter and move around the world, that starts to becoming strategically so powerful.
Mm.
And also, most of those drones and everything operate off electricity and not on fuel. So
Yeah.
starting there, batteries are going to be the focal point of the military. Then, when you think about solar and wind, our problem is not the production of solar and wind, it's the batteries. So again, it's
Yeah.
battery. Um, and so that's why I'm a believer. Number one, I put on that list will be battery technologies,
Hmm.
and then I'm going to put any type of nuclear technologies. Now the problem with the nukes is all of this is we're living in a world of state capitalism. The states are going to pick these technologies for better or worse, and then they'll champion them. And so if you want to get yours, you want to be in front of these different states and get them to buy into your technology, and then they'll champion it. But where we end up, what type of batteries and things like that, I don't know. But I put batteries top of the list.
In a way, it's like we've gone from storing, solar energy in dinosaur bones over millions of years and liquefying it to storing them in critical minerals.
Yep,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
a simple way to think about it. Well, I think when we talk about batteries, right, the big elephant in the room when you think about batteries is the role that China plays in all of this, and we've been increasing our China coverage. We just did a webinar with 3 different Chinese robotics companies. Now that that's the next wave, I think something we talk a lot about is this like idea of electrostate versus petrostate. But in a way, like China is the recipe for the new dual order. They've been thinking a lot about solar, wind, and batteries, not necessarily from the perspective of climate, but really from the perspective of security and self sufficiency first.
Yep.
How do you see this playing out on the world stage? Like, will China continue to dominate these value chains, especially as other regions are thinking about their own security, not wanting to rely on one country for something as important as batteries?
I don't think they'll have a choice in the matter. It'll probably
Mm.
be a lot of emerging markets that are around China that are going to get hit really hard on this. I, you
Hmm.
know, like just take Philippines, U.S. ally. I mean, they're in deep trouble right now. Um,
Yeah.
and whoever comes to save them, I haven't read about the Americans coming to help out the Philippines lately. And if the Chinese do the Philippines sign on the dotted line and become a Chinese ally and get all of the batteries, get everything because they need it out of necessity.
Yeah.
I don't think people are given enough lip service to how it's not the developed markets. The difference between COVID, the emerging markets were unscathed and the developed markets got whacked.
Mm.
It's the other way around. The developed markets will probably be relatively unscathed. The emerging markets are getting whacked. And they're going to be the ones who look at this, hey, I really didn't invest in this whole oil thing to begin with. Let's
Yeah.
just go straight to the electrostate that China's proposing. And let's
Mhm.
think, remember, the whole reason why US dominated the world, it was the petrostate that it pushed. So China, of course, they're going to push the electrostate. And I think that their first candidates are going to be all those emerging markets that are suffering.
Where do you think
Yeah. I mean,
Europe
I think.
falls in this? Oh, go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just touch on that real quick. I think that one of the big stories that did come out of this was Pakistan and how much they've uptook solar. And the
Hmm.
big headline was, they calculations where they saved at least 6.3 billion this year by using solar instead of buying oil and gas at elevated prices. So I just think that's a potentially an interesting case study for where the rest of some of these regions go.
Agreed.
Sorry, go ahead,
Where do you
Mike.
think Europe falls in this? That there's obviously the need for them to look more at energy security. That of course means Russia. That it also means there's dependencies there now with Germany with the import terminal for LNG and things like that. It needs to look at defense, but it also needs to look at energy security. Like how do you see Europe falling in terms of how much it needs to spend on defense versus energy in this situation?
They almost go hand in hand. For them, they
Mm,
actually can reverse a lot of this. They have the production in the North Sea, like the big gasoline
Mm,
field off of Groningen in Holland. Um,
mhm.
they have a lot of ability, restart the nuclear plants, do as much as they possibly can to solve this. Um, that is relatively low hanging fruit. But you saw they've already converted a Volkswagen factory into a missile factory. So we're moving in that very rapid pace to just an entirely different state that's focused on on creating war preparations. Once they do that, they're in a very different environment, and I
Yeah.
think that's going to have a relatively profound impact on this idea of state capitalism. I think is going to once they start directing this stuff. By the way, if there was a group of people I would never bet against on all of this, it would be the Germans. They'll be able to produce more quicker and faster than any other group. By the way, on this point, as we a group all very much fascinated with environmental technologies, I like to point out that it was the Germans who solved the war on acid rain, Engelhart and BASF. So the Germans can solve a lot of things when they put their minds to it. So you know,
Fertilizers too, right?
yeah, they may if they start working on these batteries, they might have the best batteries really
all
quick.
right, watch out, Germany. I like it.
And where
I
does the US
okay.
fit? Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask the same. Go ahead.
I mean, like we talk about batteries, wind and solar plus batteries, like that's a solution. But in the US, we just see like, okay, what was it? 2 days ago, Meta announced another 5.2 gigs at the Hyperion site in Louisiana of gas, making that 7.2 gigawatts. And then last week it was 9.2 gigawatts for SoftBank, all gas. Like, where do you see gas playing into this scenario or story in the US? Is it endless gas? Is it endless turbines? Or is there bottlenecks that are lurking?
Bottlenecks. It's the copper and the turbines. It's the
Mm,
going back asset heavy. The more asset heavy it is, the less we've invested in. It's because everybody just subscribed to that view. We'll never need commodities again. We don't need heavy asset industries. We just do software, infinitely scalable at zero marginal cost. Everything's free.
mm,
And that mentality has brought us to this point where we are right now. By the way, the Chinese and the Russians,
Yeah.
they did this. Um, and I think you're witnessing this right now. By the way, I don't think this whole situation is we're even close to it being over. It'll take a new manifestation. When I say this, meaning what's going on in Iran, because the Chinese, they're looking at this. They got such a dominant position with all the manufacturing and everything. They're not going to let this go. They now
yeah.
control the oil. They now control the world's chips, and they now control the world's metals,
Hmm.
chips, and oil now. Because essentially, Iran is a ally of China, so they now control. They're energy dominant, metal dominant, and chip dominant. In fact, as somebody pointed out to me the other day, the only thing Americans dominate in right now is in the military.
I would even argue in terms of military equipment and drones and things like that, China is ahead.
Russia had more experience in this too.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I thought was interesting in one of your latest pieces, I think it was on the molecules transmission one, was the point that we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz, we're talking about how it's closed, how it's shut, but the reality is it's not actually closed to everyone, right? I think you had a point that it's actually open to, for example, tankers going to China, and so it's less
Mhm.
about like it completely shutting off the passage, but it's kind of opportune for some specific for China.
Yeah, it's the I like to say it's BRICS versus G7, um, and they're tired of being pushed around for the last 80 years.
Yeah,
Huh.
and that's a really good point. I mean, one of the things I think coming back to what's going on in the Middle East right now and how this all plays out, we talk a bit about like short-term shocks versus long-term shocks. How do you divide in your mind what is a short-term shock, right? Of what's happening right now, like, okay, next day or next week, Trump does something, some of this gets resolved. Is this a short term shock versus some of the longer term shocks, right? Like in a way, at least in my mind, this is really sort of like a mental game that security now, people realize disruption is the new normal, that this is going to happen again and again and again. And in my mind, that's the long-term shock, that even if some of this stuff gets resolved in the near term, the pendulum has kind of swung this way.
Kim, you're one of the few who get that. That's the problem. That's what the markets are telling you. Yeah, that they're counting the missiles being shot between Iran and the U.S. and Israel. It's just a waste of time. That's what this is. This is
Yeah.
not well. It's about his decision to pull out of NATO yesterday. The implications that Qatar paid America $1 trillion and gave the president a $400 million jumbo jet and got bombed to smithereens. Then had to write a check over to the Iranians for $6 billion for protection. Do you think they're going to go back and give America another $1 trillion next time? What about Saudi? And don't the Americans need $700 billion to go finance all that AI? These are big. These are bigger questions, and I think that and these are transformational that change the trajectory of things. And when you look at these big asset rotations, they always happen around these geopolitical events. The last one where we went from new economy to old economy was 2001, September 11th. So I think we're in one of these environments right now. And we're not going back to the world that it looked like in February 28th. It's going to be a very different world.
That's kind of what I was going to ask. Like, you see this as inevitable, like these changes, or is there any sort of maintaining some semblance of the status quo, or is anybody that's thinking that just kind of deluding themselves?
I think part of it is it's going to be it's a painful, the delusion is rosier than the reality, and it's so painful people don't want to acknowledge it. I don't know how this ends. I mean, I can give you scenarios of how it ends, and it's not pretty.
And but who is it painful for, right? Like, I think in Powerstack as well, we talk a lot about who are the winners, who are the losers. In your mind, based on where things are going, who are the winners, who are the losers? Or not losers, a nicer word. Yeah. Nervous, sorry.
And this is not about, it's not about barrels of oil, or it's not about the defense. What it's about is the dollar. And the dollar is built around the grand bargain. And by the way, to illustrate the power of having the dominant dollar dominance is, right now, the Swiss franc is the most demanded currency in the world. Do you know what a 30-year fixed mortgage rate in Switzerland is today? 50 basis points. Because everybody demands the currency, and the people who live in Switzerland get the benefits. That's exactly what the Americans got. All those credit cards, all that consumption, everything was centered around dollar dominance. And dollar dominance was centered around the U.S. sends its military out to protect global sea lanes and allow that trade to happen like oil. And in exchange, they were going to use the dollar, and that big U.S. Navy was always going to protect you. And it was sitting there in Bahrain, and these are big customers of America: Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE. And now let's say I'm another customer of America looking at this in the future. They just pulled out of NATO. Do you guys ever see that movie Team America? Came out around like 08, 09, and you go bomb Paris and then leave. Yeah. I mean, this is what they did to the Arab Gulf. It's ridiculous. And so, the question is, it definitely is going to impact at the margin the demand for U.S. treasuries and bonds and everything. And I don't think that I was very clear, this is the grand bargain, and it's been violated.
Wasn't there, I could be misremembering this, wasn't there like a first of its kind oil contract last week priced in yuan?
There is. There's lots of contracts. I didn't know there was a new one last week, but yeah.
I heard it somewhere. I'll have to dig it up, but yeah.
That won't move the needle. What's really important is it's the demand for U.S. Treasuries as collateral.
Okay.
And that's the $1 trillion worth of literally trillions of dollars worth of dollar demand.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So it just goes to that point. Why would you give them money now? Um,
Yeah.
I mean, listen, those are big deals and
Yeah.
they've already started canceling those deals. Why would they?
Do you see anyone? Oh, go ahead.
It's just the cost of rebuilding alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see anyone emerging from this as, you know, benefactors in a way of this in the long run?
Besides
Or is it
China.
just, yeah, well, I guess do we see China as being a benefactor of this in the long run? Because they're also going through a lot of structural challenges right now with their
Yeah.
economy.
I'd say the BRICS are going to be in a great position.
Huh.
All right.
I
Is
mean,
there?
much as came out of this, I would have, wrote Putin off for gone.
Mhm.
This, in fact, his days were numbered.
Yeah. It was a gift. It was a genuine gift. Is there anything like parting thoughts? Would you, given where it's a newsletter about power, in primarily in the US, is there anything that you would say, like, besides batteries, besides nuclear, besides like technology plays, is there anything you would say to utilities in the US? Like what would you be looking for if you were a utility in the US?
Or an investor or a developer,
Yeah.
anyone who's like sitting in the US trying to think about where power's going.
Diversify your energy sources. I mean, that's why the
Mm,
car is the
Mm.
best-selling car. It can run off of any energy source out there.
Huh.
And your
mhm.
grid should look like the same, whether if it is solar, wind, coal, nukes, gas, oil, you name it. So you have that optionality in case something like what is happening today happens.